Boys, episode 51.
No shit. One away from 52. But 52 won't be, we've done more in a year than 52 weeks,
Yeah,
right?
there's done a couple of extras, some interviews and stuff. They all
Oh,
count
cool.
towards the episode numbers. So we're not at a year yet.
Well, we've got to be
Within
close,
next
right?
month.
Knocking on the door.
So 51, boys.
Crazy.
I feel like we haven't done like our typical podcast in a while because we've been reviewing shows and stuff like that. So we've been getting like, I think it's been a while since I actually put out the question box and be like, guys, we need some questions.
Yeah,
And we've
good
got a
point.
fair few, which we're going to get through. So we're back. We're back to answering questions and helping you guys out as much as we possibly can. But maybe you might have seen one of the announcements that came out last week. It was actually after our podcast, so we couldn't talk about it then. But about how we are going to be promoting AMB.
Yeah, it's so awesome, man.
MG, we got a lot of questions about people like, how did this come about? What's going on? Tell us the news. So maybe you want to kick it off because you're already the promoter for Victoria. So how did it come about that, you dragged us into this?
I fell asleep one night and I just had I had a dream of you two boys coming everywhere. I'm just trying to make it so that my whole life is filled with you guys wherever I go. And I'm getting closer and closer to it. But
Man, you're succeeding.
yeah, it's working, right? We talk about it all the time. It's like, and we talk about it on the podcast. It's like surround yourself with people who, are passionate about the same stuff. And all of a sudden, man, there's just potential opportunities that arise everywhere. And it's so fucking true, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this one, Jen and I had been speaking and, Jen's been awesome in giving me plenty of opportunity to kind of, push things in a certain direction. And I very much appreciate the chance that she's given me. And we're talking about, other states because Victoria's been, I suppose we could say steamrolling a little bit in terms of its momentum with A&B, getting quite a few coaches who, are really been enjoying the shows, enjoying the criteria. And, I sort of suggested about the potential of maybe dipping into some other states which were coming available. And I just knew that it wasn't something that I could tackle alone. So it just made perfect sense that, probably the two people, that I trust so much and I know who are so heavily involved in the industry and, have paid their dues, right? Have been around the block. It's not like you guys have just come into it. You know the sport, you know what it takes. And you're both just super organized. Everything that we do together, you're both always on top of it. So like everything that it requires to be successful as a promoter, which is, mainly event management and organization, you guys just do on the daily anyway. And it just made perfect sense that we all collaborated. And of course, Jen was 100% supportive too. She's got a lot of love and respect for you guys. She sees the way that you bring athletes in. She sees, the way that you treat other people within the sport. And that just aligned beautifully with what the A&B brand is. And then, we all sat down and had a catch up and spoke about the logistics of how it would all work. And we were able to fine tune and get the decision that we would take over those states and really try and make A&B what we know it is, right? Which is, a brilliant federation that puts on incredible shows first and foremost. And we just thought it was time that all these other states experience, some of the joys we've been experiencing here in Victoria of late.
So just tell everyone what states are we looking at going into and what are we already currently in?
Yeah, so we can officially announce pretty much everything that's set so far. Mm-hmm. So from a Vic point of view, the Victorian show next season, Season B, will be Sunday, September 24th. Mm-hmm. And we will have our South Australian show, which the three of us will be running too. Alongside Jen will be Saturday the 23rd. So we're going to do one on the Saturday, one on the Sunday.
Yeah.
The weekend before, we're going to have our first show in Queensland, which is the 16th. Am I correct there?
Yeah.
Is it the didn't you say it was the 17th?
Anyway, it's the 16th.
We were talking about that last night.
It's the 16th or 17th, the Saturday or Sunday. We'll release the post. We'll release the posters very soon.
Yeah. I'm going to check that out.
Yeah, and then you'll have your New South Wales shows in October, which will be Sydney and then Western Sydney as well. Now, we will also be doing Western Australia. So any of our listeners in Western Australia, A&B is 100% coming back to Western Australia. But our first show there will be Season A next year. Logistically, we just have a little bit more to organise. And with the way the schedule worked out with all the other federations in Season B this year, to have it on a weekend that suited everyone's prep and was going to allow for more competitors to compete. Unfortunately, we just weren't able to coordinate it for Season B. And we don't want to put something out that's So we're going to hold WA off till season 8 next year, but it'll be those states. So we're beyond excited for it. Logistically, it's going to mean a little bit of coordination and travel from the 4 of us, but we're absolutely ready for it. And I suppose the biggest thing, that you guys bring to the table, which is, one of the biggest things that Jen and I appreciate, is you guys bring a massive network to the table of people who, want to compete and want to support the federation and just have great shows. So I suppose we're reaching out to those people to help us, aren't we?
Yeah, definitely. I think one thing I spoke to you about, MG, was I really want to make the federation be for the people and get as much input from everyone as possible so we can really develop something that everyone really wants to be a part of. So we're going to be calling out to all our listeners and people that support us that we need your help and we want your help and we want your input. So, we're going to have to run workshops in Queensland, South Australia. So we're really going to be asking for you guys, if you know anywhere that's maybe a good place to run a workshop, any gyms, if there's any of you want to be involved, help us out in any way. If you want to, reach out to your coach and say, hey, I'm interested in helping the boys out, or I'd love to see what their show's all about and do their show. We'd be so grateful for your help, because we can do it all ourselves, but if you guys want to help us out and be a part of our journey, then that would be most appreciated. Like, this is still the Prep Coach podcast. This is not the A&B podcast. So just so everyone knows, like, we're putting you on with our journey and let you know what we're going on with. But is it still?
No,
am I still
you're
clear?
back. No, you're back.
No, you're back, bro. You're back.
Did you miss some of it?
No, we got most of it. And this is the thing that's so exciting about A&B is, like, I've been on it just a little bit longer, and working with Jen, one of the things that's never been the focus of any A&B like strategy discussions is, like, how can we maximize money, right? It never has. All of the chats I've had with Jen have been about what can we do that's going to make it better for the athletes and better for the coaches. And that's what you're going to get from us being part of it, is, like, as competitors. I mean, Scott's prepping for season B right now. So we're going to be prepping for shows whilst organizing shows. So it's like, MT, you sort of said this a little while ago. It's like literally is going to be, the federation for coaches and competitors, organized and run by coaches and competitors, right? So we know what's required to run a great show, and the foundation of A&B that's already there is phenomenal. The little stuff that has been organized in the past through A&B that Jen and the team have already done, like, the way the stages are presented, the backstage, the lighting. I just went to the New South Wales show on the weekend. The lighting was freaking awesome. I think I sent you boys a photo of, like, how, like, lit up that stage was with the backdrop. And, like, as a competitor, you felt like you were, like, in Vegas, man. It was so freaking, so freaking awesome. So, like, all that stuff, the meal prep company was there. Monster was there again. Rule One was there. Like, some of the best supporters in terms of other brands in the country are jumping on the A&B bandwagon, and that's going to just flow onto all these other states.
Yeah, and we know how it is. Like, we're competitors and we're coaches. So when we're setting up our show dates, we really were thinking, like, okay, how's this going to impact someone's prep? Is this, not the right time for their prep? Because we know that people are starting to work out their season B prep, put shows within their calendar, put it within their plan. We wanted to make sure that if we put a show on, it's at an appropriate time and considering other people's preps and maybe other federations and other shows they're doing. So we wanted to line things up appropriately, and that's why, we decided that for WA we need to hold off on that, because we couldn't find a venue and a date that was really going to be appropriate for everyone's prep. So we wanted to make sure that, we do it for you guys the best we possibly can. And that's also the reason why we've already made some changes and some new additions with some of the divisions.
Yeah, which, like, these things are really, really exciting. And when we roll things like this out, we equally logistically in the back end have a lot to make sure we get right. You can't just make changes, because there's potentially some things that have happened in the past that will now change because of that decision. But, I think the announcements that we've already put out with the new divisions, so men's fitness, which will now become, the board shorts category, which will be officially men's physique, and then men's fitness, which will now be the Euro trunks, with the legs out, a little bit smaller than men's physique in the Euro trunks, which will be Euro trunks you can supply yourself. So you can do a coloured Euro trunk. And if you want to check out a really good shot of that, jump on Scotty Morrell's Instagram and look at when he won his Fitness Pro card, he's got these beautiful, I think they're Aussie bum blue and orange. Am I right?
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah. So the Euro shorts, so, you get to see the details in the legs, and then board shorts will be self-supplied too. And then classic, we're going to stick with the black classic Euro style classic physique trunk. And then female sports. So female sports physique, which is coming out, which will sit in between bikini and fitness, which we are currently acquiring the updated sports outfits, which are going to be awesome. So they're going to have a half-cut glute, and they're also just going to have one strap across the back, so you'll be able to see all the back detail, which is
one thing
awesome.
I was adamant about with you. I was like,
cool.
We need this sportswear to fit real good, and we wanted to show as much of the physique off as possible. So halter neck, only one little strap across the middle of the back, and for the shorts, so that what they wear. It actually shows a lot of glute. Like we want to make sure we're presenting the physique the best possible can. So we're like really adamant in the sports cut and fit.
Yeah, and it's just going to have one beautiful little nice A and B with the arrow logos on it, nice and subtle in black. And you won't have to roll the sports shorts up. They'll be designed, and all going well, if the supplier is able to do this, we should be able to get them in multiple sizes. I know there's going to be a lot of listeners who are going to be happy about that, but we should be able to acquire them in a few different sizes, which is also going to be super exciting. So again, another thing about, having coaches and competitors part of the federation means, these are the little things we're thinking about. We know backstage as a coach that sometimes we have to roll up sportswear outfits. Yeah. So, we can be part of this now to make a better cut sports outfit for the females. So, and that'll be with a runner as well, that division. So awesome, man. Awesome.
I'm excited. But if anyone has any suggestions, wants to help in any way, especially because we're going to be organising, the next thing on our list is to organise the workshops, right, in Queensland
and South Australia.
And Queensland I just looked, it is the 16th.
Yeah, it is cool.
Saturday.
Awesome.
Yeah,
awesome.
So if anyone has any suggestions or ideas, we're all ears.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So that's exciting. And
one of the obvious questions that maybe you guys got asked, but we definitely got asked through the question box is, now that we're part of A&B or we're helping promote A&B, does that mean that we're only going to put our athletes in A&B? And obviously the answer is no, not at all. Yeah.
Well, I literally ran through some straight A plans this morning for season B for my team, and I was on the phone to Tony Lantiano the other day, and just trying to map dates out and stuff, and all of my team are doing ICN, all of them. Yeah. Like, we certainly are not going to just put equally this season. I didn't have any athletes in A and B.
No.
So it's definitely not, something that anyone has to be concerned about. We will be at all shows, and as coaches, we're still coaches first and foremost, and our athletes will still compete wherever the opportunity is to compete. But I got that one a few times as well.
Which is a fair question, right?
Fair question.
Yeah. We have an amazing relationship with, the presidents and the founders of ICN and NBA, and we talk to all of them all the time. And when we told them that this was going to be an opportunity that we're going to be taking on board, we said the support and the friendship that we have with you guys isn't going to change, and they totally understood and they respected that too. So, I only had two athletes in A and B this season, and I had four or five in NBA. So, and even more so in ICN. So we let our clients pick the federations along with our guidance, and based on the experience they want to have and what best suits their physique. Because another question we got asked is, what's your favorite federation? And to be honest, there's no favorite. They're all different. They all offer something different. So we tell our clients, go to every show, have a look at all different federations, see what you like, see what you want to try, and then I'll tell you whether you suit that look they're going for in that federation. Because they're all a little bit different, as we know. All bikinis are a little bit different, all sports is a little bit different, all fitness is a little bit different. So we might tell a client, maybe you're not suited to A and B, maybe you're more suited to ICN or vice versa. So we're going to do whatever is best for our team and for our clients.
And a lot of the time, the choice of show is dictated by the timing too, right? Like if you've got someone who needs to lose another 2 kilos and there's a show 4 weeks later, well, you're probably going to pick that show. But if you've got a client who's ready super early, you might do a show you weren't going to do just because you're like, you know what, you're peeled, you're ready to go. Let's jump in this one and jump on stage a little bit earlier. So timing's a big part of it. And having a coach who knows, the difference in what federations like is really important. I think a lot of coaches across the state now are getting good at understanding what the differences is between the feds.
Yeah.
In terms of what they like. I think over the last 2 years, that's definitely changed a lot. And I think people are definitely knowing what, specifically, like, would you both agree, like for bikini, it's getting really clear what look is liked where.
Yeah. It's evolved. Every division has evolved. And every division has kind of got a little bit more extreme, to be honest. Like the bikini girls now would have been a fitness girl 5 years ago, right? And fitness has evolved. People are getting leaner and they're getting bigger, right? So every division has evolved over the years. So coaches need to stay on board with that. And obviously, we also talk about, for some federations, every state is a little bit different too. So we need to be across that too.
And that's what happens when Scotty Morrell coaches you. You get bigger and you get leaner.
He creates new standards.
That's it.
It is true though, in the sense that the divisions, like as a sport, it's just evolved. And I think now that there's a lot more information, like you think about what we know now versus what we knew 5 years ago, it only makes sense. Like once upon a time, to switch it to the guys divisions, if you were on stage and you had boxed off striated glutes, you're almost guaranteed to come first. Whereas like now, it's almost like a prerequisite, like if you even want to be remotely in the conversation. So the conditioning standards gone up a notch across all of the divisions, and it's good. It means that it just keeps the pressure on. You have to keep your finger on the pulse, otherwise you get left behind.
Yeah. And this podcast is a perfect example. Like MT, when you and I did my first show, there was no like bodybuilding podcast to go listen to every week on like comp prep. Now there's so many of them, right? So like the information availability is so much better, which is a good thing for the industry, as long as the information that's being put out is good quality information.
Yeah.
It's a big plus for the sport.
All right. You want to move into some questions?
For sure.
Let's do it. So we got a couple of questions around post-comp, because everyone is pretty much post-comp now from season A. So I think there's only maybe one more show, which is this Sunday, the ICN All-Female Classic. Other than that, everyone's pretty much in their reverse diet recovery phase, whichever name you want to give it. So we obviously got a lot of questions about that too. So one of the questions was actually talking about handling your appetite between shows, right? So one was about what are the best hacks to curb a high appetite after a contest prep when you have back-to-back shows, right?
As in week to week, back to back?
Yeah.
So
like you compete on
2 weeks apart, a week apart, whatever it may be. People come off the back of a show and they're like, they've got to get straight back into it because their next show's coming up in 1 or 2 weeks, and they're just struggling because they're finding their appetite is out of control.
Yeah, which is common, right? I suppose the thing is, man, like your motivation after stepping on stage once to do better should be so damn high. And equally, you've kind of just gone through, say, 20 weeks of dieting. And, in a lot of cases, it's like you do one show and then your mind says, okay, you can just switch off a little bit now, when, I think it's a time to kind of dial up and go a little bit harder. Your motivation levels should be high. I think a lot of people feel like they can't get through that next week or two when you've just done it for 20 weeks. So just remember where you've come from and what you've achieved leading up to that point, and use that as your motivation to push through. And like we always talk about, right? If hunger levels are high and you're trying to get a little bit leaner between show 1 and show 2, you're probably in the place that you necessarily need to be. I'm not saying that, high hunger is a great thing all the time, but it could mean that you're on track to getting that little bit better than you did last time. So, your motivation should be yourself.
The thing is about appetite is there's a physical reason why maybe your appetite's high, and then there's like a mental and emotional reason. So like, I would say is, okay, your appetite's high. Are you getting good sleep? Is your hydration good? Is your food volume good? Food selection, blah, blah, blah. We'll be talking about all those metrics. But then if we're talking about specifically coming off a show, there's a big mental shift there. You're coming off a massive high and dopamine hit of a show occurring. The next day or the day or two, you're going to have a crash. So after you do an intense workout or something that requires where you go through a big dopamine hit, what happens after that? It goes down, it crashes. What happens to you? You want to take it easy. You want to rest. You want to eat a little bit more food. It's normal. Could be after anything. It could be after anything. So the body's going through that process. It's just had this massive high. It's coming down from that. What does it want to do? It wants to chill out. It wants to rest. Wants to eat a little bit more food. It's not ready to hit the ground running. So it's okay if you have that. Just need to understand the reason why, and just always fall back on your habits and your routine and schedule, because your body's going to tell you to rest and take it easy, and it's going to increase your appetite because it wants to recover from the comp that you just had and the big dopamine spike that you just had. You need to stay on track with your habits and the way you are going through this process. So there's no way to really curb the appetite. It's about understanding why it's there and just giving yourself time to come out of it.
And also factoring in that the reason you start to feel shit a few days afterwards is because if we look at how the last few days of peak week tend to unfold, you typically, if you're competing on a Saturday, your last real tough session was probably on a Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
So training goes down, expenditure goes down, and then food comes up, washing off fatigue, topping up muscle glycogen. But then once that glycogen is dissipated and you go back to training and you go back to your low day, everyday intakes, you know, you got to think about it logically. It makes sense. You haven't got the same amount of carbohydrate on board. So energy availability is no longer there, and perceived lower energy availability is always going to be apparent. So you kind of just have to accept that all of that's now left my body. Now I'm back into a state of getting leaner, in which case you just have to kind of suck it up. It's not, there's nothing that you can do other than all the things that you said: sleep, make good choices around your food, keep busy. But obviously if you're ready, then it should make it a little bit easier, because hopefully you're able to start bringing your food back up closer to maintenance. And I think if you've got big weeks between shows, if it's 2 weeks, then it probably affords you a little bit of time to spend a bit more time at maintenance and stay a little bit topped up, a bit fuller, greater energy availability, because otherwise it can be a pretty lonely couple of weeks. But on the other side of it, if you need to make refinements, then you just need to work harder, and you just have to lean into it, because the alternative is you won't. And I can guarantee, I've seen it backstage, the look on someone's face when they stand next to someone else who looks disgustingly peeled, they're shredded, and they're like, you know what? Maybe that person just dealt with being hungrier a little bit better than I did. And maybe I should have worked a bit harder, and maybe I should have pushed a little bit more on my cardio and not had that extra bit of this or that because I thought I was a little bit hungrier. Because that feeling when you have to then go and stand next to that person, you know that you're not 100%. That's a pretty shit feel. I've never personally had it, but I reckon it would be a pretty shit feeling. And I've seen people backstage when they look at, you know, a super peeled, let's say, imagine, I'm going to use Amy as an example. Let's say you can see her, she's pumping back up, she's looking ridiculous. And then you perhaps have been a little bit slack, didn't go about things perhaps as good as you could have. You maybe didn't push as hard, you know, in the last week leading into your show. And you see her pumping up and you have that feeling like, fuck, I should have worked harder. Like, that is what I'm going up against. That would be a really, really shit low feeling. Like, all of that, was it for nothing? Blah, blah, blah. You don't want to have that feeling. So my advice would be embrace the suck. At some point, it doesn't matter, and this is what I've been trying to explain to athletes of late. It doesn't matter how high your food is. If you're truly peeled, you're going to feel like shit regardless of how much food you're eating.
Yeah.
It's not going to attenuate your hunger, because it's physiologically based, in the sense that until you get some fat mass on you and you have a period of time where energy availability is no longer compromised, that's just how you're going to feel. So you can either choose to lean into feeling like shit and think about food, or you can just accept that it's there, and then you just have to move on with what needs to be done. It's an abrasive sport, and it's super, super tough, but that's why not everyone competes, because it's not for everyone. We're a unique breed that, you know, pursue physique sports. So I think at some point you just have to accept it is what it is, and until you get some fat mass on you, then that's just the way that it's going to be.
Yeah. It's really interesting. Like, I picked up something that you said. It's like, you're going to be, if you're fully shredded, you're going to be hungry, right?
Mm-hmm.
But why don't you think about your hunger, or why do you just ignore your hunger when you're in a prep, but as soon as the comp is done, all of a sudden you're
You
hungry,
can't. That's what I was saying to
right?
them
You can't
before. So
control it, right?
exactly.
And it has nothing to do with anything physiological. It's all psychological. And
Yeah,
that's
mentally,
kind of,
you've just checked out.
you mentally you're checked out because goal is tick, right? Tick, tick, goal done, competed, done. And if you have that mentality, like the goal is to compete, get on stage, and then it ends, right? You're never going to have any motivation post that point. It's like motivation done, goal done, everything done, cool done. Body goes, sweet, okay, we're done, sweet, go eat now, right? Let's go be hungry, let's go eat. Whereas if you see being a competitor as a process and not as goal, like there's goals that you hit, but literally it's a process. Competing and being a good competitor is a process. There's an off-season process, there's a comp prep process, there's a reverse diet process, and there's an off-season process, and they're all just processes, right? And if you more process driven than goal driven, you're going to be a little bit more successful. Because I know in myself, and some of the best people that have handled post comp are people that are like, comp done, I need to nail this reverse because I want to compete again.
That's
So
right.
it's about being the best competitor and going through the process of being a competitor, right? So you see it as you're motivated through your off season, you're motivated through your comp prep, you're motivated through your reverse diet. You're continuously motivated because you're not just like, this starts here, it stops there. It's a continuous process that you're going through. So be process driven and let that
Yeah,
drive you,
fuel your motivation.
fuel your motivation, than to be, I competed, goal done, tick, okay, I'm done now. Where it's
Mhm.
like, no, 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 your next comp may be in a year or two. To be the best there, you need to continue on with this process. So see the end of every phase just a checkpoint, and not the end or the goal complete. Just see it as a checkpoint, right? And that it's a continuous process that you go through. Being a competitor is a process. And then also too is, I was listening to a potty, and they used, I hope I don't stuff this saying up, something about don't let your environment control you, control your environment, right? So you come out of a show, right? You have the ability to control everything that goes on around you, control your environment, not only your physical environment, what you have in your fridge and your pantry, right? Which is going to make the biggest difference of whether you go off track post comp, but the environment of people around you, right? It's going to make the biggest difference. So educate people, because if your partner or your friend or whoever you hang around with doesn't know what your process is and doesn't know that you just can't binge and eat like a normal person right now, it's a transition to that point. You need to let them know so they know to not continuously ask you to eat out, buy you crap, and continuously put food and things in front of you that are going to derail you. Control that environment. Let those people know. So I know when I came out of comp, my family's like, "Oh yes, you can this," and I'm like, "No, I have to slowly get back to that point. I can't do it now. Yes, we'll have dinners out, but I need to slowly." So even when I went to my parents for dinner after that, I'd make sure that they didn't pressure me to eat all this food. I had 4 birthdays after my comp finished. After, like, the months after my comp, there was 4 birthdays, including mine and my brother's, right? And I would be like, "Nah, just give me a small piece of cake. Nah, just only a little bit." They need to people like control the people around you and your environment, because that's only going to help you. They're your biggest support system. So it's going to make all the difference. So yeah, don't let your environment control you, control your environment, and it's going to help you so much to go through that process of being a competitor. Yeah. What do you think, Scotty?
I agree, man. I
Yep.
completely agree. I think you need to factor that in, which is why we periodize. Competition prep is phasic in the sense that there are multiple phases within a year, and each phase has a purpose and serves function. So just because we finish a show, and that was what we were speaking about the other week, in terms of understanding that for me, the first 4 weeks are crucial in terms of how you go about it. I'm not a massive fan of people going out to eat out within the first 2 weeks, just purely because how you are when you first finish, you're very, very vulnerable, and it can be a very slippery slope. So leaning into highly palatable food versus I'm been craving pizza, make homemade pizzas. All my friends want to go out for pizza, have everyone at your house and then do it that way. At least that way, as you just said before, you can control that environment. You can control the cheese that you put on your pizza. You can control the toppings. And majority of the time, you'll probably be able to consume more food for less calories. And again, it just buys you some time, because how you'll feel 2 weeks post-comp versus how you're going to feel the next day, very, very different. How you're going to feel 2 weeks after that, better again. And then I've found personally, normally through around about 4 weeks, once someone has, if they've bought into that first 4 week process, they're in a much, much better and safer place for us to be able to put them back over the fence. They can go out for a meal and not feel that they have to eat the entire menu and eat like an asshole. You know, they can eat to enjoy a nice meal, and they can have some dessert, and they can go home and go to bed. They don't then have to go home and have a packet of Tim Tams, and then the train just keeps on rolling, because typically that's what does happen in those first few weeks. Versus if you don't, I actually had this conversation with Ali this morning talking about, I find the athletes that are able to get the leanest, the quickest during prep are the ones that are most consistent in the improvement season. And one of the questions I keep getting asked the most, oh, how are you going with your food? I'm like, I'm eating the exact same foods that I would eat when I've been in the improvement season for the last 3 years. I'm just eating a little bit less of them.
Yeah.
Nothing else changes. And again, those top tier athletes that are able to get the leanest, they're the ones that are usually able to have their food sit a little bit higher in the improvement season, because they're less likely to go out and to deviate. They're creatures of habit, and they're engaged and they're adherent to the process, because it's not just about doing a prep and winning a medal. They just love the sport and the environment and just the day-to-day nitty-gritty. And so I think if you can, and it's not for everyone, which I get, but if you want to have a long-term career or be involved for a long period of time, that is the approach that you need to take if you want to be successful, both as an athlete, but also in terms of holistically and just being able to compete and then be able to be put back together in one piece, versus I compete, I'm completely broken, and then I'm fucked for a year, and then I decide to do it again. It doesn't have to be like that.
No. And we're not saying that it's easy.
No, it's absolutely not. No,
it's not easy.
Not at all. But the way I look at it, I'm like, if you've dieted for 28, 30 weeks, really, what's another 4 weeks when, if you're truly peeled, your food's going to be above maintenance anyway, because you're trying to get some acute fat mass. So you're going to be eating more, which means that you can open up some different types of foods. You might be able to make homemade pizzas or parmas or whatever, but just at least getting those first 2 weeks under your belt, and then maybe go out for a meal and then see how you go. But then after 4 weeks, like I said, 95% of the time, athletes are really, really good, and they're in a much better and safer position. And obviously we still want to try and track some of the metrics that we look at during the recovery phase. But if they were to then go off and do their own thing, they're going to be a lot safer and better off 4 weeks post than they are the next day. So they're just some real basic takeaways. And again, we're not saying this because, as Trimboli said in the past, we're trying to be killjoys. Like, these are all things that we can all agree that we would adhere to. I don't think I went out for a meal for probably 6 or 8 weeks after I finished prep. Didn't feel the need to. If you can just eat a bit more and you're going to eat from home. You boys, I mean, we know you're exactly the same.
Yeah.
You didn't have any desire to need to eat like an arsehole, trusted the process. I mean, you're the one that's competed most recently, Trimboli. Your food's probably close to the highest it's ever been. You're in a good, healthy body weight. Composition's the best it's ever been at that.
Yep.
Success leaves clues. So I think if you do want to be involved long term, then that is the approach that you need to take. And it's more or less just conducting yourself like a professional. Like, you want to. I find it funny when you see people on Instagram, I won my pro card and whatever, and then I see them the next day and they're eating like a fucking asshole and they're doing this and they're doing this. I'm like, well, you're not really conducting yourself like a professional, because I know that the top tier people in this sport, that's not how they go about it.
Yeah.
And that isn't what's best. And also not really leading by example either. Don't get me wrong, if you choose to do that, that's fine. But in terms of, is it the most optimal way to be able to conduct yourself, then no, I don't believe it is.
Yeah. Anything on that, MG?
No, but I kind of want to go off path with something that Scotty said.
Yeah, go.
how he said, success leaves clues. And I want to talk about successful people. And I want to just try and help a few of the listeners, because a couple of things that I got this week, and I've seen it myself, is we've spoken about this before, but let's be a bit more specific. Like, and you were touching on it before, who you surround yourself with, right? Your circle. Some you pick, some you can't, right? And when I say some you pick, some of your friends, some of your partner, you pick them, and some of your family and you can't pick, right? But I'm noticing a lot when people start to chase a goal down relentlessly, right? Go really, really hard and start to see some success, that sometimes the people in your circle can't deal with it. Yeah. They can't operate on that level, right? They can't operate on that level. And it's like, same with, in business, the more I'm doing, the more I surround myself with people that are like that. And the more other people I see who don't have that same attitude tend to drop off me, right? Because of the high functioning level. And like, I've had an amazing athlete recently whose friends have done a bodybuilding intervention on them.
Wow.
Right? Like, you're getting up early. We hear your alarm clock. You're always in the kitchen. This athlete's not asking these people for anything. Not asking you to cook for me. I'm not asking you to wake up when I wake up. I'm not asking you to do my sets and reps. I don't even make you talk about bodybuilding at all. But, this person's operating at such a high level and he's achieving amazing things, right? And deserves all that success. But he's having people around them now starting to pull that person down because of the high function that this athlete has. So what I want to know, like, because, I've got my opinion, but from you two boys, what would you say to that athlete? What would you say to that human being who's starting to experience a little bit of, like, advancement in their life, both from a sporting point of view, and equally everything else is kind of falling in that person's life too? And Scott spoke about it before. Success leaves clues. One thing's going great, and all these other amazing things are happening to this person now too, right? Starting to find their way with their career. They're getting ideas about what they want, and the people around them are just not operating on that same level, and they're now trying to pull that person down. So I want to know, what would be your piece of advice, each of you, to that athlete? Let's say it's an athlete of yours. What do you think you might say to them? Because I don't want to be too harsh, but at some point, I start to question, is that the circle that you want?
Yeah.
Like if this person was asking them for shit all the time, like, I'm so tired from the bodybuilding work I'm doing. Can you wash my clothes? Can you cook my food? This person's asking for nothing, nothing at all. And these people equally are not even saying, hey, you're doing fucking amazing. Well done. But that's supposed to be a friendship circle. So, without, again, trying to be the buzz killer, at what point do you say, I'm operating here now, and if you can't keep up with me, then that's totally fine. Like,
yeah.
But what this person's starting to do, which, disheartens me, is they're now starting to bring their own successes down so that they don't say anything in front of these people anymore. Yeah. They don't post. They don't so these people are now taking this person who deserves it more than anyone in the world. They're starting to take this person's joy, and they're changing the way that they're acting around them to not make them feel bad.
Yeah. Well,
I don't know what your thoughts are.
In Australia, we've got that tall poppy syndrome, where people want to cut people down that are doing really well. So there's probably that aspect there. It's probably a cultural thing. And then I would say it comes down to their insecurities and their jealousy of that person being successful. And it's just showing the distance between them.
Yeah. And
also, too, I'd probably be guessing, and maybe I'm guessing correctly, is this is a young person, right, who probably has friends around them that are probably at different phases in their life, or there's no common ground anymore. When you come out of school, everyone's doing the same shit, right? We're all just come out of school. We're young. We're driving around. We're drinking. We're hanging with our friends. All this kind of stuff. So everyone's there's a lot of common ground there. But then people start to separate. Some people start to be more career orientated, going a certain direction. Other people going another direction, and there's distance, right? What I'm assuming, if this person is young, she's starting to notice that distance. She's starting to notice that there's a difference. There's no more common ground anymore, right? So there's probably an insecurity and jealousy on their side, and there's also now it's seeing, okay, I think our lives are heading in different directions, and I would say to that person that's going through that is just start to separate yourself, start to control your environment, right? Start to control who's around you. the last thing you want to do is to change the person that you are just to accommodate other people around you that really aren't respecting or supporting what you're going through.
Yeah. And this person's so accommodating of everybody.
That's tough then. If you've got a personality type like that.
That's their personality type, is they're always thinking about what someone else is feeling. You know what I mean? Like, which they're an amazing human, but it's like, I equally want that person to enjoy their own success too, because they deserve it. They've earned it. No one's given it to them. It's been earned.
So that person needs, because if they've got that personality type and they're kind of like a people pleaser and don't want to, they're going to need someone like you to give them that kind of advice and really help pull them out of that. But they're probably going to need other friends or family to help pull them out too, because they're probably not going to step out by themselves.
Yeah, it is a tough thing to do.
Yeah. What do you think, Scotty?
Yeah, I think you need to be really, really protective of the environment that you expose yourself to. That's something that I've always been a very big advocate of, that you are a byproduct of the environment that you surround yourself with. So if you hang around people that drink and do drugs, guess what you're probably going to end up doing? Mm-hmm. You're going to start drinking, doing drugs. You hang around people who lift weights, you're probably going to start lifting weights. Who eat, chicken and rice, you're going to do the same. So I think at the end of the day, if you're outgrowing, and there's nothing wrong with people having different values and different things that they want to do, but I think you probably need to have a look at that circle, because in my opinion, those that matter shouldn't mind, and those that mind really don't matter. So if it was me, I would be pretty brutal and cutthroat and just say, at the end of the day, we are a unique breed, those that are into training and a little bit more systematic, but you should never have to apologize for who you are. At the end of the day, we don't ever make anyone feel bad. Like, you think about when you're in prep, someone's like, oh my God, you look so skinny. It's like, well, when someone says that to me, my first response is, well, that's a really strange thing to say to someone. And you look back at them and they have this look, and it's like, yes, I'm telling you that you're a fucking idiot, and that was a dumb thing to say.
Yes, I'm telling you.
Because would you ever walk up to someone and then just say to someone, oh my gosh, you've been eating a lot? Like,
never.
Look how tight your pants are. Wow. You would never do that, because it's like, it's just not a nice thing to do. But on the other side, some people just don't have that thought process. So I think sometimes answering a question with a question in that sense is a good thing to do. So if someone was to bring that up, my first response would probably be, why does it bother you that I'm doing what I'm doing? Am I making too much noise in the kitchen? And explaining, just so that you guys understand, getting up early gives me purpose in my day. Training and cooking my own meals, it allows me to be structured and to move closer to my goals, which is really, really important to me. Does it bother you that I'm chasing my goals? So they're coming to you with something and you're going back to them with a question. So put it back on them. Why does it bother you? I'm just not quite sure. I'm healthy. I've got someone who's overseeing the process. They're very educated. They know what they're doing. This is probably the most happiest I've been in some time. If you guys are my friends, surely you want me to thrive and succeed. And then if you guys don't like it, then perhaps our values don't align. And I think then, as you just said, MT, you need to have someone like MG or whoever that person is to just drag them over and expose them to an environment where there are like-minded people. Mm-hmm. And they feel, you know what? I've been hanging out in the wrong room. This person's encouraging these behaviors that I'm doing, and they see the positivity in it, because you should never have to apologize for who you are.
For sure.
And as the saying goes, everyone else is already taken. So just be yourself and do you. And if everyone can't get on board with it, then it's their loss. And you have to be able to be brutal, to be cutthroat, because long term you'll be so much better off for it.
Yeah.
And if you want a taste for the right environment, go down to Suve's. Is that what's it called?
The D's.
The D's. Sorry, it's been a few weeks since I've been there. And then go and have a cremosito with the boys on a Friday. It's always an open invitation, and then you'll get a taste of. And I think that's the thing. Sometimes until you find your tribe, you don't realize perhaps just how toxic a certain environment can be. Very similar to like with a relationship and a person. Until you find that person who lets you be who you are and encourages it and supports it, rather than tries to change or tear you down.
Yeah, well said, man.
The people that come on that Friday night, half of them aren't even competitors or people that care about fitness.
Not at all. And One of the
But they're
first
fucking
things,
supportive.
They're
one of the
supportive, aren't
first things, the first time that I went to that Friday night, I probably didn't speak as much as normal. I was just sort of observing as I tend to do. And the one thing that first just set home was what a great fucking bunch of human beings. Like everyone loved it. And was good to be able to have a chat to say like Drew and learning about what he does. And, you know, he's a fucking handyman of everything, can fix
they?
everything, you know, talking about cars. Everyone has their own, you know, talking with Dave about his daughter and you can relate. So everyone supports everyone and their endeavors and whatever they do. It makes no difference. No one begrudges anyone for dieting. And equally, when the topic is of something that perhaps they may individually not be as engaged in, they still, you know,
Give you the time of day
yeah, exactly right.
and support it.
Exactly
And
right. And
like equally
that's an
like
example of being in the right environment and never ever like, oh, why are you going to have some of this? Like, there's nothing about that whatsoever. And also on the other side, does anyone sit there and say, man, why are you having 3 soups and chicken nuggets and chips?
exactly.
Yeah.
Like
I heard
equally,
they actually ran out of soups the other night.
well, MT's a beast, man. He can put them down. I'll tell you what. But like equally, it's the same group who will make sacrifices for you, even though you might be dieting. MT, this happened to you a lot, where we'll go, I'll eat, and then we'll just go get a coffee together. Like it doesn't always have to be around food. But I think when it comes to success, one thing that stuck with me is like, think about, and anyone who's listening, think about this: who you surround yourself with. There's a couple of types of people when it comes to success. Your friends or your circle or your family who are genuinely happy for your success no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
And then those that are happy for your success just don't have as much success as them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And think about what sort of person you are and think about what sort of person you want to be around. Do you want to be someone who is happy for everyone no matter what they achieve, or just happy for people that do well but just not better than you? Don't ever fall into that trap.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That was a good tangent, MG. It was a good tangent.
Yeah, or maybe I got a bit passionate about it.
No,
But
I'm glad we
you
went on
guys
that.
know, look, you guys know my personality, and I just love seeing people do well at whatever, whether it's related to this sport or not, or in life or
Mm-hmm.
in their personal endeavors. And I try and give everything to make sure that people do feel that. And when someone else brings somebody who's giving their all down, it just frustrates the shit out of me.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
It's like, I understand, I know what it's like to have insecurities, but I can have insecurities myself and keep them to myself and try and deal with them myself and not bring someone who's trying to do something around me down.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what? When I got insecurities, I talk to my mates. I talk to you guys. I say, boys, I'm feeling this. That's what a friendship circle should be. Not like I have an insecurity and I say to MT, oh, MT, are you really pushing hard this off season? You could be like, that's what an insecure person does. It'll find something on someone else that you're insecure about yourself. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So just think about that.
Like I say this all the time is if you go through a comp prep, you really find out who your friends are and who your supporters are. Really.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, true, bro.
All right, let's bring it back. Let's a couple things. Let's go into the technical stuff. So there was 2 questions and they were very similar. It was basically about how much weight should you gain post-show and how much weight should you ideally gain each week post-show? So Scotty, maybe you want to talk about that, percentages or how you kind of dictate how much someone should gain after a show.
So firstly, it's context specific in terms of firstly, how lean was the athlete? What was their category? So if it's someone who's typically been super shredded, so can use Carl as an example because I know he won't mind. So for example, he's just competed, was very, very, very conditioned. Straight away, we want to get some acute fat mass on him. So we're taking his food not to maintenance, but above that, because we know that we need to put him in a positive energy environment in order for him to accrue some fat mass. Again, putting in place those recommendations, not eating out, just sort of sticking to being at home, even though he's a very controlled and very adherent and compliant athlete. And typically we're looking for, so for him, it was 3 or 3.5 kilos we wanted to gain back within the first sort of 7 to 10 days. So some acute fat mass. And then from there, it was a little bit more of a controlled rate of gain where we were aiming for in the realms of actually, I think it was 0.5 or 0.7% to 1% of body weight. Again, it would depend on the individual and also knowing where you predict they need to land to be in a good position in their improvement season. But sometimes those parameters can equally change. So I've had someone who we put in place some projections where we thought they would be. They hit them a bit earlier, had some trouble with being adherent and compliant and was way overshooting. And typically sometimes when this happens, and I actually had a call with another coach this week about one of their athletes and how to navigate around it. When you have someone that's perhaps binging or over consuming and they're doing the binge restrict, and we refer to that where they'll overconsume calories and then they'll do cardio the next day because they're trying to, I don't want to fuck this reverse up. But what they don't realize is that all you're doing is leaning into that desire to want to eat more food, because part of the problem is you've been in a prolonged period of energy deprivation. So what I'll typically do, and this is what I encourage this coach to do, is to increase their intakes pretty drastically. So I think we took up their carbohydrates by 125 grams and fats by 5 grams. And that extra increase, straight away, the athlete's going to be resistant. Oh, I'm going to gain all this extra fat, yada, yada, yada. But when we look at it from a quantitative perspective, we're talking about an extra 550 calories a day. And when you add that up over the period of 7 days, that's giving you a little over 3,500 additional calories. So you're looking at around about an extra half a kilo of fat mass that you're adding to that physique per week. Say you do it for 2 weeks. But on the other side of it, you're going to attenuate, hopefully, that desire for them to go and eat unnecessarily. If they agree, I don't want you to eat out for 2 weeks, right? And this is the intervention that we're going to put in place. And as a result of that, they're eating all this food. So firstly, they'll be able to attain some form of satiation, provided they're sensible with what they're eating.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result of that, they're less likely than if you just keep their food the same and then they go under and then they have a 6,000 or a 7,000 intake back to back. They might have had an extra 10 or 12,000. So sometimes by giving a little bit, it's better to do that short term and you can control it. And I think it's also important to, if that does arise, let the athlete know that there's, when they have a massive bloat like that, there's going to be an element of inflammation, of excess food volume, of increased sodium, which results in water retention as well. And obviously that is why they may have had a 6 or a 7 kilo increase overnight. Not all of it is going to be fat mass. When we factor in a kilo of fat mass, 7,700 calories, if you've gained 6 or 7 kilos, and I've seen that happen before in the space of a day, unless you've consumed 42,000 calories above maintenance, it's probably not all fat mass. It's water, sodium, glycogen and food. So it's important that you explain those things and obviously put those systems in place. But going back to what we would recommend, I think a couple of kilos immediately, acutely, within that first 7 to 10 day bracket, and then putting in place, where do you think you want them to be at, say, the 10, 12 week mark, and then reverse engineer back from that. Typically, you don't really want to be much further, I don't think, than maybe 15% above stage weight by that marker, because then they're just getting unnecessarily soft. And you also want to allow a wiggle room to be able to then enter a push phase and actually enter a controlled surplus. So I would normally say you want to be around about 10% above stage weight by about the 6 week mark. Is a good proxy. And then looking at roughly 0.5 to 0.7% of body weight per week. But again, if you've got someone that hasn't been, bearing in mind that we're looking for markers, A, we want to get bloods done, but B, looking at things like libido, food focus, what else would you be looking at? Also perceived energy availability, quality of sleep, moodiness, whether you're in a better mood, all those things would come into it as well. But also bearing in mind, if someone's been truly peeled and they've dieted for a long time, that it is likely that some of those things, it's going to take a little bit longer for them to come online. In particular with the females, with your menstrual cycle. So don't freak out if it hasn't come back after 3 months, but it only heightens the importance of getting on some fat mass straight away and being in a positive energy availability environment for a period of time, and then not dieting until you can get that back. And if you do those things, probably 80 to 90% of the time, it will come back on its own. It will be fine.
Yeah, mine's very similar. So within that 6 weeks post-show, you want to, go about 10% above your stage weight.
Mm-hmm.
But probably about 2 or 3 of that percent is right in the first week. And the rest is kind of spread out past that point.
Mm-hmm.
So it's slower rate of gain past that point. And as you said, everyone's different. Like we're talking about bikini athlete versus a shredded bodybuilder. Of course, can be a little bit different, but it still works on percentages. The actual
Yep.
number of weight will be higher because they're going to be a heavier person in general, but kind of works on percentages.
And I recommend working off bandwidths rather than just every week. Because if one week your weight goes up 800 grams and you're like, fuck, I've got to pull food back down, don't do that. Like if it keeps going up by 800, 900 week, then maybe you need to pull back. But give yourself a threshold of 2-week blocks. No different to what we do in the improvement season with the gaining phase. One week your weight might go up by 800 grams. The next week it might plateau. The week after it might be 100. It's all about looking at it in a phase or a block of time.
Yeah. Anything on that, MG?
No, I think the biggest takeaway, think about what Scotty said, is no matter what division, pick your ideal scenario 10 to 12 weeks from now and just reverse engineer it. And that's your plan right there.
Yeah.
Simple. Pick your ideal scenario, work out what that would be for that athlete, whether it's, 6 kilos, 8, whatever it is based on the individual, work out the weeks, reverse engineer it, allow for a little bit extra in the first week, and that gives you what you need, basically.
You're good to go. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we spent a fair bit on the potty about post-com. So there was a question about season B, so a prep coming up. And I think this is from the same person because it came in anonymously and it was one after the other. So I'm assuming it's the same person, unless two people are going through the exact same thing and asked a very similar question. But one was, I'm a first timer doing season B ICN. How do I know where my physique should be every week? And the second question that came straight after that, my coach is a first-timer coach, and I'm also a first-timer competing this year. How can I trust that I'm on the right track? So, ICN first-timer. It doesn't say if it's a male, female, bikini, or bodybuilder. I'm not too sure. But whenever we've got a first-timer, we're kind of guessing what their stage weight's going to be, right? Going to be like, okay, this person's 65 now. Maybe they're going to be on stage at 53. And then we kind of reverse engineer that based on percentages and we kind of, what they should roughly be their rate of loss every single week, right? So that's how you're going to know if you're kind of on the right track, if you're going at that rate every single week. That's how I look at it, right? Mm-hmm. And then also you're going to get photos and you're going to visibly be able to see if they're on the right track. Now that's a bit tougher if you're a first-time coach because you've never seen someone transform from a off-season bikini to a comp lean bikini. So you're not going to know what to see every week or what to see at certain checkpoints. That's going to come with experience. It's a little bit tough for me to kind of tell people what they should look for. But so you want to see certain details at certain time. You also need to look at someone's body composition and go like, okay, they hold a little bit more body fat in their lower. So if I see their shoulders getting shredded, I'm like, okay, cool, we're done. They're shredded, right? Like we've got to start looking at the areas of their body that we should see start to show signs of body fat coming down and separation coming into play, difference between muscle groups coming into play and things like that. So that's a little bit more of an experience thing. The rate of loss is something that a first-time coach could potentially work out pretty easily. And as long as they're okay with kind of guessing that person's stage weight, based on knowing their history, have they ever been lean before? What was their weight at that time? Do you have a photo of what you looked like when you were roughly that weight? And they could kind of take a good estimate of, all right, you're probably going to be on stage at X body weight and then go from there. What do you think, MG?
Yeah, what I was going to say is it's a tough one. Like, don't assume that the first-time coach can't get you there correctly, right? Because that first-time coach might be the next Michael Trimboli. Right? Who knows what he's doing? He just needs time, right? He just needs experience. He might be the next me, the next Scott. Like I was that coach too. And the systems I have now versus what I had for my first client are so different, right? Mm-hmm. But as a baseline, the things I would be asking is, how much do you think I need to lose across how many weeks, right? Like, is your coach expecting you to lose 15 kilos in 15 weeks? Because I'm going to tell you now, you're probably not going to get there. Mm-hmm. Think about how much you need to lose per week, work that out as a percentage. And is it fitting somewhere in like the 0.5% of your body weight range as a really approximate rough guide, right? Generalized. So do you have enough weeks is the first thing that I'd be asking. But again, not having prepped anyone before, not knowing exactly what you're going to be like on stage in terms of and then figure is hard. Whereas, I know if I have someone who walks in first time, I'm like, oh, they look pretty similar to this competitor who was on stage at that. So that's what I'll use as like a bit of an approximation. And plus, the longer you do it, you get better at it. But I would say as a baseline, you want to know roughly how much they think you need to lose over how many weeks, and then work that out and think, am I going to be able to actually achieve that? Knowing that not every prep is linear. You're not going to have a perfect 0.5% of your body weight or 1% of your body weight every week for 25 weeks. So making sure that you have enough time. And as a new coach, one of the things that I did wrong, which I'm happy to put out there now, is I was not allowing enough time. And one of the things I've learned over the years is to allow myself more time than I used to when I started. And just assume that you're going to run into some roadblocks and give people more time to get ready for that show. And equally, what I get now that I didn't have back then is the type of competitor I get is different. So I was typically starting with someone back then as a first timer who needed more time than the athletes that I'm starting with now. So all those things are key considerations, but I think just ensuring that both you and your coach have allowed enough time is probably going to be the biggest thing I can give you as a takeaway.
Scotty?
I think when you're mapping out, if you're a first timer, however long you think it's going to take to get that person conditioned, add 20% and then start from there. And then when you think they're close or they're pretty much on the nose, then take 2 kilos off that physique, and that's probably where they need to be.
Mm-hmm.
Or alternatively, if you are a first timer, hopefully you've had experience via being coached by someone else. And so you can employ some of those coaching modalities and protocols that your coach has employed, because I think if you haven't really been through that process, it's kind of hard to be able to navigate someone through unless you've got a really good educational background in nutritional science and exercise science in terms of understanding how the body works and how to manipulate it. Because I find it funny when people are like, oh, we're going to aim for 0.5% of body weight per week. If you've got someone at the start of prep, they're going to have the most amount of fat mass on them at the start than they're ever going to have on them throughout the contest prep. So it makes more sense to be able to be more aggressive initially when you've got more fat mass that you can liberate per unit of energy, per unit of time. And then as we start to get closer, we know that when we do go through a prolonged dieting period, we are going to see some degradation of lean mass. We want to protect it and utilize nutritional interventions to the best of our ability to do that. But there's still going to be some lean mass that we're going to lose. So we need to factor in that as we start to get closer to our end goal, we need to be able to reduce the magnitude of loss that we're eliciting. So therefore, we need to factor in a larger rate of loss at the start. So I think you need to have a timeline in place. And as you boys know, I use checkpoints. So for example, this is our 6-week out checkpoint. This is where we need to be. And then you should have all of that pre-planned when you're mapping out their contest prep. And then as they're going along, you should be able to communicate that with the athlete. And if they are behind, you get to your first 6-week checkpoint and you're like, they started at 70 and I want them to be at 65 kilos or under. Okay. So I'm going to be aggressive, 1.5% of body weight for the first 6 weeks. And they're at 67 kilograms, then they're behind. So you might have decided to have a slower rate of loss on the next block, or I was going to have a diet break at week 10. That diet break isn't there anymore because you don't have that luxury in order to facilitate it. So it's constantly evolving and you need to be able to auto-regulate on the fly. And it's really rare that anything ever goes super like perfect from the get-go, even when we map it out. But if you have those checkpoints, then it gives you the ability to auto-regulate on the fly, and that you can be like, all right, we're a little bit behind. So we're going to dig a little bit earlier than I thought we would have maybe planned to, but at least that way you can stay on point with your timeline. And then worst case, if you're not sure, organize a consult call with a coach that you value and that you respect, and then get their take on it. What are your recommendations? And this is not self-serving, but I'm saying, but people in our space do that all the time.
Yeah.
In terms of, like I said, I had a call with someone during the week. This is what I'm dealing with. What would you recommend? Yada, yada, yada. It doesn't make you inferior or whatever. At once upon a point of time, we were all beginners and everyone was first starting out for the first time. So there's nothing wrong with trying to seek help from someone who is where that you want to be, because that's how you learn.
Yeah.
So I think if you're really not quite sure, there's nothing wrong with you as a coach in terms of reaching out to someone else, to a Michael Trimboli or a Michael Galante or, whoever it may be, and then getting their take on it. and perhaps what they would recommend. And maybe it'll give you peace of mind, or maybe it'll be like, I reckon we're maybe a little bit far behind. And I mean, a lot of our athletes are coaches in their own right as well. And I don't know about you boys, but my athletes, part of it is educational as much as it is coaching them, because they're trying to improve and apply a lot of what they're learning with their own clients as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Like all three of us are open to anyone reaching out and asking questions.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a coach or if you're a competitor, ask us. We're more than happy to help because we were once you. We know how it feels. Yeah. Let's just finish on one last one. It should be a quick one. It's about prep also. When starting prep, would you increase volume, say from 3 sets to 4 sets, to minimize tissue loss? Scotty, you want to hit it?
At the start of prep, I wouldn't, because typically you're going to make the nutrition system work like for you. And again, you got to think about when we make an adjustment, the rationale behind it and the tools that we have in our toolbox. So I don't think if you've been doing 3 sets and now you want to start doing 4 sets, again, you're taking from food in terms of, so you're adding to expenditure and then you're trying to eat less. Sorry, start again. You're taking from food, so you're making life a little bit harder from a recoverability perspective. And now you're going to add in more volume, which is only going to make that more challenging.
Yeah.
I think too many athletes, or too many coaches, I should say, will go down the path of trying to add more, rather than just let the deficit work for them. And instead prioritizing the volume that you do have and really heightening the emphasis behind it. So if you've only got, on your leg day, you've got 20 sets, you've got 8 sets of quads, 8 sets of hamstrings, and 4 sets of glutes, versus doing 40 sets, like, some athletes do. You know that those sets that you're contributing, they need to be of the highest quality, and you really need to send it. And sometimes when you reduce volume, it really shows you how to train hard, and you'll learn how to train hard, because the amount of people these days that just do endless junk volume, it baffles me, really.
It's not quality.
No, it's not. And quality does and always will shine through. So I think there's no point adding in unnecessary volume. Just be sensible and make the deficit work for them, and just prioritize the importance of the volume that they are performing and make sure that it's done properly.
Yeah, if you want to minimize tissue loss, it has less to do with your training. As long as you're training appropriately, you're not doing anything ridiculous, then your training pretty much stays as is. If you want to minimize tissue loss, you should have, obviously, you're going to be in a deficit if you're in prep, but you don't want to have it anything extreme when you've got extreme weight loss, especially at the back end, when you're in an extreme deficit. You don't want that. And you want to make sure that your protein intake is high. And you're doing all the other things around training and nutrition to be as optimal as possible can. So we always say, like, eating around training, having your most calories around training, that's going to help with minimizing loss too. But if your rate of gain isn't extreme, your rate of loss isn't extreme, especially at the back end or close to the show, then you should be able to minimize any kind of tissue loss.
Yeah, and if anything, I will typically reduce volume as we get closer, because again, you're trying to protect training performance. I'd rather have an athlete have a session and they complete 16 awesome high quality sets versus say 20 or 22 like they might have had in their first couple of mesos, if it means that the quality is going to be there, because again, they're in an energy deficit. They're not going to be acquiring, unless they're enhanced, new tissue. It's all about preservation. So if we can preserve contractile tissue on 16 sets, then go for it. In terms of energy expenditure, the difference in calories expended in a session, if you're doing 16 sets and they're good quality versus 20, in some cases, I would argue that you're probably going to get more from the 16 if they're of a higher quality, because those last 6 or 7, if you know that you've got to do 22 or whatever it is, then there may be an element of just too much fatigue, mental, physical, neural. So, you've got to weigh that up and let the deficit work for you. I think too many people always want to take on the expenditure side of things rather than just, it's okay to be a little bit hungry and to just eat a bit less and let that work for you, so that you can at least recover from the intensity and the demands that you're placing on your body.
Also reduces your time in the gym. So you're not there for so long, because we've got to be so time efficient within prep, because there's so many things we need to do within a day.
So Scotty, you're saying I can't do 50 sets? 5 times a week?
No, nothing more than
Oh.
40, bro.
And Scotty, I was going to ask, in that prep plan, when do I get a refeed, bro?
Mm.
In whose prep plan, sorry?
The one we were talking about, if you got to push hard on the rate of loss and we just got to keep digging.
Yeah,
When
Yeah,
do I get a refeed? When's my diet break, bro? When's my refeed?
that don't happen, bro.
that's it.
Just keep digging until there's nothing left.
That's it.
No, and just to be clear, we're being joking.
Okay. Yeah, they got
At the back end, if you're really lean, you should be spending more time at maintenance than you are in a deficit for that very reason. So
Yeah,
hopefully
you
at
get
least
refeeds. That's when you'll get
3 or 4
refeeds
up, and then a couple down so that you can protect that.
when you're there early. Yeah, for
But
sure.
you get to that point, and that's afforded by doing the work early on and working
sure.
hard and embracing and losing the amount that you need to lose early on instead of taking shortcuts and making excuses. So just do the work.
Yep.
All right, boys. There was a lot of good analogies and quotes in that whole podcast.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
was deep
was
today, man.
This was a good one. Hopefully gets a few downloads.
You should call it the deep episode.
Yeah, we dig
There
deep.
there was some, but in all seriousness, there was some good takeaways there. So I think a lot of people will hopefully be able to take something away from that. Yeah.
All right, boys. That was another one, another good one. Episode 51 done and dusted.
52 next week.
Yeah, let's do it. All right. You enjoy the rest of your day, and
Thanks,
we'll chat
boys.
soon.
Appreciate
You
it.
too, boys.
Take care, legends. Great
See you,
session.
boys.
Bye.